While I was in school, remember I had been tutoring. And when I was in school as a freshman, MIT has this thing called the UROP program, Undergraduate Research Opportunities Program. And you can get a job basically working in a lab as a freshman, sophomore, junior. And they're real jobs in real labs. And so I was interested in computer science. So I got a job in a lab run by a guy named Seymour Papert, who was the guy who created Logo, the language Logo. So sort of very legendary computer scientist. And I don't know if anybody remembers the Coleco Atom. Anybody remember that computer? Yeah. So the Coleco Atom was coming out, and they were putting Logo on it as a programming language. And I spent a semester helping take the Logo language and put it on the Coleco Atom. When I say I did that, I was kind of like the junior grunt on the team that was making sure things kind of worked. And it was all right, but it paid $6 an hour, and it wasn't quite like my tutoring job, and I kind of missed my tutoring job. So somehow, and I can't remember exactly how, I ended up doing some consulting, for some spreadsheet stuff and different things like this. And this was actually in the midst of this period of time where, when I was in college, where with a group of partners, I started a business. So the path to that was, this is pre-Feld technology, the path to it was my senior year in high school. I got a job after tutoring. I got a job working for a company called Petcom. At Petcom, this was an oil and gas software company in Dallas, Texas in 1982. It was a husband and wife team. I was their first employee. They grew in 83 and 84 to about 30 people, 20, 30 people. I wrote 2 of their products, and I got paid $10 an hour. This was versus the $6 an hour I got in the lab. I was getting paid $10 an hour. And I got 5% of gross revenue. And
Your idea or theirs?
Theirs. Yeah, so they paid me $10 for every hour I worked. So if I worked 80 hours, I got $800 that week. If I worked 40 hours, I got $400 that week, plus 5% of gross. It was a fair deal. I didn't really think it too hard. While I was a freshman in college, I was regularly getting checks for $5,000 or $10,000 a month for royalty payments for the software that I'd written. The check would show up for $5,800, and all the food would be on me for a couple of days. I mean, it was good. So I had this sort of income stream dynamic. I had tried this lab thing. Very unsatisfying. Through my dad, one of my early mentors was a guy named Gene Scott, who was an older guy who was a patient of my dad's, who had a company with his son that did voice recognition. So it was very early on, you could talk into a microphone into an Apple computer and it would recognize your speech. Not very good, you had to train it. It was speaker dependent. But about this time, the Mac was coming out. So Apple hadn't come out with the Mac yet, and we decided to start a software company to do software on the Mac, me and 3 other guys in my fraternity. And we raised $10,000 from this guy, Gene Scott. We bought a Lisa computer, which is how you program the Mac. We were all going to school at the time, and we were all doing these other things. And this company, which was called Martingale Software, ended up being a complete debacle. So over the course of a year, we basically made no progress. I think we got paid a little bit from some consulting projects and things like that. Learned a lot about partner and partner dynamics, and ended up folding shop. And we sold the Lisa computer for $7,000 and returned 70 cents on the dollar to this investor. So that was failure number 1. Through this, though, I started doing this consulting. So I'm like, all right, I'm making this money on royalties. This company thing didn't work. And I can't remember how I got some of this consulting projects, but I was charging $25 an hour for doing consulting projects. And along the way, I tried to start another company. And another company that I tried to start was with a guy who had worked as a client of ours at Petcom. And he started a company called Datavision. His father-in-law gave us $20,000. And he had 80% of the company, I had 20% of the company. And we wrote software for doing cephalographic analysis. Amazing to me that I can remember it. And it was technology out of LSU that was basically a precursor to automated plastic surgery. So you took an X-ray, you digitized the X-ray, you drew points on the X-ray on the screen, and it reconstructed the face, and did a really crappy job of it, but it was really intellectually cool. And we wrote this software that nobody ever bought, and that company folded. And I don't know whether he ever paid his father-in-law back the money or not, but it sort of disappeared, and he owed me a bunch of money. So it was kind of one of these weird situations where, all of a sudden I realized I had a partner that wasn't really a partner. This wasn't really a business that was working. So I learned a lot. So these 2 sort of very early failures sort of on the backdrop of continuing to get, $5,000 checks, $10,000 checks. If I wanted to do consulting, I could do consulting. And then I thought I would go back this summer for Petcom to do work. And I kind of wrote all the software in the summer, and then in the winters I got paid royalties. And the oil and gas, the price of oil went from $30 a barrel to $10 a barrel in the course of the summer, and Petcom went out of business.
So this is circa 86, 87?
A little bit earlier, like 85.
Okay.
They actually didn't go out of business. They pivoted. They became a CD. The guy who was the owner started the first CD disc store, music CD store in Texas. He then took his software for oil and gas accounting and modified it so it was a point-of-sale retail software, and then turned Petcom into something and built a whole new business out of point-of-sale retail software. So, people think pivots are a new idea, but I mean, pivots have existed as long as there were P's and I's and B's. I mean, they've been around for. So that was sort of the genesis of it. Through college, I ended up, one of my fraternity brothers' stepfathers was a dentist. He became one of my consulting clients. I ended up doing a bunch of software for him, which they deployed in 1987. He had about a $20 million a year dental practice. He had 100 people working for him. He had 15 dentists. He could do a root canal in about 15 minutes. And he figured out this insurance scam. He was in California. He figured out this insurance scam where all of his patients were members of unions, Teamsters, whatever. And he cut the contract with the union for how often he could see him and what he could bill. And then he optimized his business around that. He had a call center. He would call people in. It's been 5 months and 30 days. It's time for your cleaning. It's just really remarkable. So we automated what was a very manual thing. And that was really the first Feld Technologies client. And so on the back end of that, when I was a senior, you sort of jumble all this stuff together, so you get a bunch of experiences while going to school, some that worked, some that didn't, plenty of money flowing, sort of this independent vector. I never really thought about getting a job. And my first partner, Dave Jilk, and I, he had been a partner of mine in that first company, Martingale, which had failed. We ended up starting Feld Technologies. He was working for a startup. He was the first employee of a company called ViewLogic that ultimately went public and was a pretty valuable company. And he'd been there for about 2 years, was frustrated, didn't like being an employee, kind of wanted independence. And I said, well, let's do this together. So we had, to get to the $10, we had 3 shareholders. There were 10 shares of stock. I had 6, Dave had 3, and my dad had 1. And he got 1 for being our initial investor with $1. He got to buy his shares. But he acted as our initial advisor. He was a client, and his business was a client, helped us, but really a very early mentor in terms of somebody we could trust and go to on a continual basis as we were figuring out what we were doing.